This might get us in trouble. I'm Josh Hellbach. This is George Rushing.
How you doing?
Today, we're going to be explaining why there's going to be a fake alien invasion, why all banks are fucked, and the curious case of Milf coin. So, how much do you have invested into Milf coin?
Fucking 25% of my net worth.
Good God. Why?
I mean, honestly, just off different millionaires I've got a chance to network with and different people I got a chance to meet, and more I look into it, I feel like Milf is going to be the future of social media, and different guys that I've followed on different social media sites that I feel like predict with really good accuracy. Like, the one guy, I have his name in my in my laptop. He predicted the Bitcoin drop back in April. And so pretty much he predicted ETH, predicted XRP, any coin you could think of other than pretty much Dogecoin. And so I think longevity-wise, Milfcoin will be the future of social media, which is tough to kind of swallow. But I think in a year or two, you won't be laughing
Oh
too
my gosh. It's literally called Milf coin. That's like the definition of a shit
But
coin.
it's like buying characters, and people like
So you're buying cartoons.
people essentially, bro. It's like, I would just say, okay, I hate to say this out loud, but let's say 85% of the world is dumb.
Okay.
I would say out of that 85%, I would go 20% dumb enough to actually buy this shit, and the other 20% like are just buying it because they hear other people getting it. And for me personally, I read it because I'm one of those people that look into things and research things and really look into it. And right now it sounds crazy, but just imagine the people that invested in Bitcoin, they thought it was crazy. Or the guy that created Dogecoin, who sold his Dogecoin for a Honda Civic, and Dogecoin jumped through the roof. Cryptos are the future of money. It's kind of like in the previous episode where Mitch talked about cryptos and how the Fed are going to eventually create their own coin. The U.S. dollar is going to depreciate so much that they need something else to be dependent on. And that's why kind of what he already alluded to, kind of like the alien invasion thing. Like, think about it, 2-3 years ago, you read into it, they were denying the existence of aliens. They were denying everything about aliens, and then eventually it jumped to, well, let's start getting in front of this because they want to normalize it, just kind of like the LGBTQ stuff, kind of like everything else. They want to normalize it so that when things do actually happen, that is not
People aren't freaking out.
people aren't freaking out. It's a normalization.
And that relates to MILF.
Exactly.
Ha.
That relates to MILF because right now that seems like a crazy far-fetched idea. But over time, you got to think about.
Couldn't you do that for any shit coin though?
You could and you couldn't. You got to think about. Just kind of like what we talked about. Elon Musk pretty much controls like much of Bitcoin. But if you actually look at it lately, ETH and XRP have separated themselves from Bitcoin because usually they move on the string, but lately they've been moving separately over the last week. And so now that people kind of see the I guess, lack of better words, the fraudulent nature of Elon Musk, they've kind of separated themselves from, because people pretty much were using that as, oh, I should buy Bitcoin, or I should sell Bitcoin, I should do this. But now it's starting to become more that people see the potential of cryptos. And so now you see like the big fight between XRP and the government right now. XRP is actually winning that fight. And now banks like Texas just, they're backing ETH and XRP right now. And so now if you see one state do it, other states are going to just start doing it because another state did it. It's kind of like anything else you look at, it just takes
Right,
one
it's
person.
taking hold.
Exactly.
It's far-fetched.
It's far-fetched.
But the fact that Dogecoin did what it did because of one Elon Musk tweet, like, gives me hope in it a little bit. And the thing that actually gives it credibility in my mind, because I laughed at your face when you told me you put 25% of your net worth into Milf coin, just because the name is it's so good. But the only previously me and Mitch were talking about the state of the U.S. currency in regards to the Fed, credit, and really dove into it on a very specific scale of where we think the U.S. currency is going to go, and ultimately we came to the conclusion, based on the knowledge that we have right now, that the U.S. currency is probably going to be moving over to a electronic currency, Fed coin, or something along those lines. And if we do move to a Fed coin, all the entire banking industry will be destroyed. Now, granted, is the banking industry going to go down without a fight? No. Is there going to be some way for these bankers that actually have controlled U.S. monetary policy for the last 60 years? Are they going to get one pulled over by the Fed? Probably not. Is there going to be a backlash? Yes. Are they going to be integrated into it? Maybe. But regardless, we know that we're going to be moving to a type of crypto U.S. dollar.
Well, if you look
if we do that, then I can see why people would use stuff like Bitcoin, Ethereum, and maybe Milf coin more as an alternate currency to Fed coin, because it's more easily traded, and it's completely separate from the government. Because if you're going to be exchanging this, you don't really want all of your money to be able to be tracked at all times by the U.S. government, because essentially what the Fed coin will do is you'll be able to do all your transactions with FedCoin. All your loans will be coming through FedCoin. All of your mortgages, all of your paychecks will be coming through FedCoin, because that's an easier way for them to actually increase revenue through the IRS, which is something that they've been wanting to do for a very long time. And the best way to do that is to move to an electronic currency, so that everything is under their umbrella. And people, especially Americans, are going to be like, hey, no, fuck you. I don't want you knowing about all my assets. So I'm going to have quite a bit in FedCoin as an easier way to transact, but I also want to have it in some of these alternate currencies, so that I have a diversified portfolio of usable assets, essentially liquid assets, that aren't completely tracked by the U.S. government and taxed by the U.S. government. So in that respect, I can see why they might do that, but it's just so far-fetched.
I mean, it's far-fetched, but if you really look at it,
it's probably going to happen, though.
If you talk to people from other countries, like, a lot of things are already going electronic overseas.
Right.
We're really late to the party.
China's already got a working crypto. I believe the EU is working on a crypto. The Fed has been working on crypto for about a year, I believe. So we'll see what happens with that. But leading up to that, I mean, you would need an act of God, essentially, to be able to move to be able to take out the banking industry, because ultimately the banking industry is the largest lobby. Like the gun lobby, fuck that. The banking lobby is by far Wall Street. They're intertwined entirely with the banking industry, and that's by far the largest lobby in the U.S.
I think, especially after COVID, after seeing how they all tanked during COVID, people are looking for something more stable, something that is more people monopolized. Because, I mean, even when you look at the markets, I mean, if you really want to give an exact estimate of what's happening in the stock market, people are essentially 1%. The banks are the other 99%.
Right.
And they pretty much control what goes up and what goes down.
Yep.
And so people don't like that, because, like, I mean,
there's no control in it.
There's no control in it. Yeah. And everybody wants power, and you got different countries that's trying to figure out, how can I go from a second, third world country to a first world country?
Yeah.
And so they're trying to get ahead of this curve. The U.S. is trying to stop it, and that's why there's a big fight between the cryptos and the government right now in the U.S. Because
the government doesn't have control of it at all.
Exactly, they don't have control of it, and so that's why, kind of like what you talked about earlier, we're alluding to like an alien invasion, because I personally think long term they want to create a universal crypto, so that everybody's under the same
world
currency,
coin,
so that the U.S. can monopolize it and pretty much bully people into like, yo, we're going to control this.
Yeah, well, that meant along with all other globalists.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think longevity-wise, like, any crypto makes sense right now, because over time it's going to be more and more, no matter
Right.
which one you look at. It's going to be ones for social media, one for everything. It's gonna be one for everything. And so I think over time, I mean, even just from looking at other countries and how much they've increased in crypto activity. I mean, I can't remember exactly the name of the city or the state that I was, or not city, but the country that I was looking at. But they pretty much said they want to be like the central of cryptos.
Yep.
And so people are getting behind it. And so, I mean, I hate to say it, but the people are starting to speak a lot louder than the government. People are sick of the people being controlled by the government.
Yep.
And the government is trying to figure out ways to get more control. Right. And so that's why I think COVID came about.
Yep.
And I think that, you know, kind of what we alluded to, the alien invasion is going to come about. And it's not going to be a real alien invasion, but it's going to be something that just enough to scare people because they want to have a universal government.
Yep.
Because
a one world government.
Yep.
So and that alludes to what Ronald Reagan talked about. He said the greatest way to unite the world is to have an external threat, alluding to an invasion. And every single conflict that has ever occurred has been between two states, right? It's not, most states, when there's a battle of power, aren't going to figure it out amicably, right?
You even think about '08, they started a whole war over oil.
Right.
I mean, Iraq and Iran, they started burning the oil. And like, fuck it, this is what you want.
Exactly.
We're going to burn this shit.
Right.
And we sent everybody from 9/11. I mean, not 9/11, but we sent all the firefighters.
Yep.
We sent everybody possible to go save oil.
Right.
And we made it a bigger issue than what it was. Or you even look at the Cold War.
Yep.
We were upset because Russia was pretty much trying to do socialism, and we want things to be more democratic, because if we make it more democratic, we give people the illusion that they have freedom when they essentially don't. And so, and Russia was pretty much like, yo, you don't fucking have freedom, and we want it to be even amongst all people.
Yeah.
And so any country that
and they failed miserably.
Exactly. And that's what I mean. Any country that wants to create socialism, they're trying to kill. Because if they kill that, they spread the democratic idea and they give people the illusion.
Allegedly.
Like, I mean, think about how much.
But I mean, ultimately, those are just two superpowers going head to head.
I mean, just think about the U.S. I mean, we think that we're in the land of the free, but think about how much is not free.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, that we can go way back into that of how over time private interests have really stripped away a lot of the freedoms and principles that America was founded on.
Even that Bill Gates backs the World Health Organization.
Right.
Like,
I mean, he's the largest contributor to the World Health Organization outside of China and the U.S.
He makes more money than the World Health Organization.
Well, they don't really
just kind of
make
like what he says is, you'd rather be an investor than a CEO because you monopolize more of what's going on. Because your money, I mean, money rules the world.
Exactly.
And that's why I think cryptos are so important, because they aren't regulated by different countries. I mean, even you look in Chicago, they just killed a mining plant that had a bunch of cryptos.
Yep.
And that's supposed to be a big deal. But for the government, that's a big deal because that's something they can't track.
Yep.
They can't regulate.
Right.
So it
was the IRS.
Yep, exactly.
Yep. You know the term, don't mess with the IRS. Right? It's like, oh, you guys are throwing money around the world, and we can't track it, we can't trace it, we can't get a piece of that. No, we want some of that, and that kind of we'll try to tie this on into the fake alien invasion. So you've been hearing a lot in the news about these tic tacs. You got General Fravor. You've got the House and the Senate having to put out basically a dossier on everything that the U.S. has on UFOs. They don't call it UFOs. They call it like unidentified aerial phenomenon, some bullshit. But that's going to be coming out here in the next month or two, and it's really, I think, to get the idea that these things exist and that they're foreign into the collective consciousness, so that when these things come in and they're hostile, we can be like, it's not as, people won't call bullshit on it and be like, oh, that's crazy talk. New York isn't being attacked by aliens. These mind control things have been used by the CIA and the NSA and the all the three-letter agencies for their entirety. This is a massive disinformation campaign.
The FBI and the CIA been sitting on all this evidence and nobody knows about it.
Exactly. Like, and the evidence that has come out always leads back every time to naval and Air Force X projects.
And then
so you got
all
like
the way
the
back
X,
to the 60s.
Exactly, it goes back to the 60s with the A-12, which was used by the CIA to spy on the Russians, which ultimately was loitering over many nuclear facilities and was picked up by the Russians at the beginning as a UFO. And a lot of times, a lot of these UFO events are just modern naval and Air Force tech that they haven't released to the public.
And it's kind of like, just like you look at, like, I mean, and I hate to talk about them, but I mean, you look at Germany when they had Hitler, some of that, they were ahead
Right,
so
the Horten.
far. They had to destroy Germany in order for people. They had to create a common enemy to destroy. I mean, even any of the modern inventions came from the Nazis, essentially.
Yep.
I mean, you look at doctors, you look at the futuristic of almost any field that you could think of.
Any field that it was very influenced by the Nazi regime because they had some of the smartest scientists. We wouldn't have gotten to the moon without the Nazis.
Exactly.
Neither were the Soviets. The reason that the Soviets were so far ahead of us in regards to the space race at the beginning was because they got a lot of the scientists that were working on the X projects for the Nazis. They called them the Victory projects, or the I forgot they had a bunch of different projects that they were the first to come out with the intercontinental, the ballistic missile, jets. I mean, the Horten, I forgot the name of it, but the Horten brothers in Germany came out with a jet-powered flying wing in 1945. We used that design essentially to make the Northrop Grumman B-2, B-21 Spirit, the massive stealth bomber that we have. And I mean, if you look at those things in the sky, they look like aliens.
Yeah.
And ultimately, where we're getting with this is to have the Fed coin and the global coin require a global not necessarily a global governance, but a global council that controls the entire world.
And I mean, essentially, you kind of need people in order to make the world switch over to those things. You got to instill fear in the population.
You have to instill fear for people to give up their rights so that you can take more control, which is exactly what we saw in COVID. And that was like the amount of information horrible globalists got in this past year of what people are willing to put up with when you infect them with irrational fear is horrifying. It's like, okay, you can shut down the entire world for almost a year off a virus that might kill 1% of the people that it infects, when in reality it's a little bit higher than the common cold. That evidence is going to be used against us. Make no mistake. There are so many powerful people in the world that now see a way in to creating a global governance and to taking in more power, because ultimately that's really, I mean, what is the one thing we know about history? People want more. People in power get drunk on it, and they always want more.
You almost think about Ronald Reagan. He talked about the war on drugs.
Yep.
We didn't find out the war on drugs was a fraud to the 2010s.
Yeah.
And that happened how many years ago?
And we're still doing it.
And we're still doing it.
And we incarcerated more people than any other time in history. We destroyed thousands of communities for absolutely no reason, and when all we needed to do was educate and decriminalize. But instead, but that was also a lot due to the pharmaceutical industry having influence on Ronald Reagan, and basically taking naturally occurring substances, boiling them down into pharmaceuticals and selling them. But if you can get a thing of weed, if you can get a weed or a gram of weed that's going to take care of your pain for a night for $10, or you can get addicted to Oxy, well, they want you addicted to Oxy because then you're a repeat customer.
And now you look at
and
the
you can't grow it yourself
crisis and stuff like that. Now they're trying to come up with all these things for the opioid crisis, but they created the opioid crisis.
Right.
I mean, think about how many kids you know are on Adderall.
Yep.
They're on like a lot of these different drugs that really aren't good for you.
Right.
But they said they were good for you, and now they're trying
and
to back
people
off
believe
what
it,
they're
which
saying.
goes back to your point of 80% of people are stupid. I don't even know if it's stupid, but it's more just uninformed.
I wouldn't even call it stupid. I would call it influenced by the masses.
Yeah.
Like you're seeing other people doing these things. And you're like, well, this is a
They're
smart
doing
thing.
it. It can't be that bad. Peer
Exactly.
pressure.
I mean, it's almost like back in the day when people used to work in factories. I thought it was a great idea. Now you see all these
They
people
sold
coming
their
with
farm. They went into
lung
the cities.
cancer
Yep.
and all these
Asbestos.
different things. And now they're trying to sue and they're not getting money because they're like, well, you knew what you were getting into when you got into this. But essentially they didn't. And I mean, if you look back at history and you look at the current, you see the trends that they do things to monopolize, to pretty much run things and do things the way they want.
That's actually a great example. And we're getting a little bit off here, but basically what happened is during the Industrial Revolution, people were like, okay, I can work on a farm all day, or I can move into the big city, get the same pay for this factory job at a cotton mill or whatever, in the textile industry, and I can sell my farm and live great in the city. But ultimately what happened was these robber barons went out, bought all the land for stupid cheap, and now they control all of the farmland in the U.S. and they control all the food. And if you can control the food, you can control pretty much everything.
Exactly.
It's so that is kind of the ideal we're getting on here. It's like the amount of like COVID was like big-ish, but you fake an alien invasion. You essentially state that the only way to fight this foreign threat is for the world to unite because their technology is so much higher than ours, and we're all going to unite and fight this thing, and it's going to be great, and all the world's going to come together and kumbaya, and we're going to go kill these aliens. And at the end of it, once you beat the aliens, which they had control of the entire time, then, boom, at the end, you don't go back to being a private nation.
Yeah.
You don't go back to being a private citizen. You are now a world citizen, and you are underneath the one world order, as people say, or the consolidated nations. And if you look at, we can kind of get into the details here of like, if you're looking at these videos of these Tic Tac shaped objects, the flying discs, people say that it's like impossible. They say that these technologies are completely impossible to create here on Earth. They're extraterrestrial. We have had
these technologies for centuries.
We've known of these technologies for a long time. So let's get the first one out of the way.
I mean, it's kind of like some phones. Like, it's some phones that's from China or other countries that are illegal to have here because they're so technology advanced. They don't know how to regulate.
Well, and they also track you. Like, and then it's not the U.S. tracking you, which we're totally fine with.
Yeah.
But if China can track you, no. Huawei can go screw themselves.
Yeah.
But if you were to give a phone to somebody in World War II, they'd be like, "What the hell is this gypsy magic?"
Yeah.
So we're looking at something out there right now that it looks like it has no means of propulsion, or it's like, okay, yes, it doesn't, but there are many other ways to propel yourself other than internal combustion. I mean, the jet engine was thought illegal 2 years before, and then we go over to Germany and we're like, oh shit.
I mean, the best example I can think of is alcohol. Like, think about the effects of alcohol. Think about the effects of alcohol compared to the effects of weed. You look at the effects of a lot of things like tobacco, like cigarettes literally have on them, you can get cancer, you could die. Yeah. You look at alcohol, they're talking about you drink too much alcohol, you could die. But weed, you can't smoke too much weed and die.
Okay.
So they make weed illegal because they don't know how to tax it. So because people could grow it naturally, just like they can make their own alcohol, but making your own alcohol is less common than growing your own weed. So that's something that they can regulate and control on a lot bigger scale. So as soon as they learned how to control it on a bigger scale, then it was able to go out to you. And look at how big the alcohol industry is.
Right.
Look how big the tobacco industry is. And so now, similar to those things, like when they figure out how to regulate weed better, that will become legal. It's not about the bad effects or the good effects of weed, no matter how much research, because at the end of the day, people were smoking weed. The Aztecs were smoking weed, and that's more than documented that a lot of ancient cultures, they smoked weed ceremonially. They smoked it regularly.
Right. So what does that have to do with aliens? Other than
what it has to do with alien. why I bring those things up to compare to the aliens, because when you talk about the aliens, you talk about cryptocurrency and stuff like that. When they're trying to figure out how can we step into this space. This is a space unlike these other spaces where we can't just make these illegal and people don't use them.
Right.
Now we have to accommodate to what's going on, but they can't get a grasp of it because it's so unregulated that they can't track it.
Yeah.
And so the difference between like tobacco, weed, and all those type of things is those grow out the ground. Crypto is digital, and you can't track digital. It's so many. I mean, you look at the black market, and you look at online. The internet is so many waves of internet that we don't even know about.
Right.
That people can,
and that's where Bitcoin came out of the dark web. I mean,
Exactly.
Bitcoin ultimately got a significant amount of its value at the beginning from illegal transactions that were used in Bitcoin on the dark web through what was the name? What was it called? Crimson Road. What was the name of that?
I can't remember. I know what you're talking about too.
Yeah, so there was a illegal drug and gun running market on the dark web, and at the beginning they really almost entirely used Bitcoin and then another coin.
They used Bitcoin and a different coin, and so since they couldn't regulate that, they couldn't really catch drug dealers.
It took them a very long time to catch the guy that was at one point one of the largest drug dealers in the world.
Exactly.
But he never touched a drug in his life.
Never touched it.
He connected the buyers to the sellers, and the entire transaction was through crypto and completely encrypted, so nobody knew, no one was the wiser, which is why they found the guy that did it. But I mean, there are still a ton of alternate websites, alternate people like him that took the exact same technology that he used on the dark web and started their own.
Exactly, and so that's why I think it's so powerful, because when you really retrace back in history, you look at all these things. Nothing's ever really changed.
It's not simple. It's very simple. It's always about power and control when it comes to the elites controlling the public. Now, let's get into the actual craft.
Yep.
So the biggest thing is people don't understand how crafts can fly without any form of internal combustion, which makes sense. Inertial dampening is a well-documented phenomenon that happens where you can essentially, so right now we're in 1G, right? We're being pulled towards the earth. There are technologies out there, inertial dampening, that can not make you levitate, but they make you weigh less. So it's called inertial dampening. So if I'm at 1G right now, there's a way where you can actually take 80% of that, of your weight off of the earth. So if we're at 1G now, say we get an inertial dampening device, we are now at 80%. So we say weigh 400 pounds, we get in said machine. Now, in comparison to the earth, we actually weigh 100 pounds or whatever 80%, 20% of 400 pounds is, math. But that technology is proven and is viable. We haven't seen a lot of technologies that use it, especially in the aviation industry, which is something I kind of want to talk about. The aviation industry really hasn't changed much in regards to propulsion and physics since the 40s, or since the 50s, really. We had jets back then, we had airliners, we had supersonic jets, and hypersonic, or Mach 4 or 5 with the SR-71 and A-12. We're not really sure of how fast they were going, but those technologies are still used today, and we really haven't, in regards to internal combustion, or in regards to jet and ramjet propulsion, we haven't really changed much since then, but the amount of money that is going into the aviation industry is massive.
Yeah.
And the U.S. government has been looking into alternate forms of propulsion since the 50s. So you're telling, like, let's be completely honest. We're never underestimate the U.S. government's ability to waste money. So maybe they did just throw away a shit ton of money on black projects and don't have these inertial dampening devices. But from the evidence that we've seen, it's like, okay, well, this is an inertial dampening device. Absolutely. We know these crafts exist. We know that they are they can traverse air and sea, so they can move between medians very well, which leads to someone to believe that it is inertial dampening or anti-gravity. Now, when everyone talks about this, they say, oh, anti-gravity is impossible. It's like, okay, yes, with our current technology, anti-gravity is impossible. But to achieve what we've seen in the videos, like the Go Fast video, you actually don't need anti-gravity for that at all. If you those Tic Tac shaped objects were not that big, and we don't actually know how heavy they were.
Yeah.
And they were putting off a thermal signature, which is how we picked them up. So it's very likely that they had an inertial dampening within them, and also an alternate form of propulsion. In regards to what actually got them to those speeds, we're not entirely sure whether it was a way for them to bend space, which is kind of anti-gravity, but there are certain ways around it, and I'm not smart enough to be able to explain them, but I am smart enough to be able to say that it is very... within physics, there is a way to dampen gravity's effects. And if you're in a craft, right, so Mach 6 is about, well, in regards to human exploration, I believe Mach 6 or Mach 8 is the fastest we can, no, Mach 12 is the fastest we've went with one of the jet-powered X-15s, I believe that's right. But if you, and the biggest question people have about these craft is like, okay, if they're manned, all right, and they're pulling 15 Gs, these people are going to be a freaking plaster on the wall of this craft.
Yeah.
But with inertial dampening, you don't have to deal with that because say I'm at 1 G right now, right? Say I'm pulling 10 Gs, okay? Well, if I'm in an inertial dampening craft, that perceived effect on my body could be 2 Gs.
Yep.
It's like, okay, well, that's totally within the realm of possibilities, and most people can handle 8 to 12 Gs for short periods of time. Most fighter pilots can do it. Not most people, but it is possible to pull 12 Gs. Well, 12 Gs, okay, in an inertial dampening device, I mean, we're talking about 80 Gs there. That's insane. So in the realm of physics, it's possible. Do we understand it? No.
Yeah.
But if you're the government and you want to control and you want to create the perceived extraterrestrial effect, you're not going to let anybody know about that. You're not going to let presidents know about that. You're not going to let private industry know about that because ultimately your goal is this goes back to the whole deep state thing that the president is in charge, yes, of day-to-day operations, but there are many people that have been inundated in the fabric of the U.S. economy and government and military-industrial complex that have been there for hundreds of years. Their families have been there for hundreds of years, and they have an incredible effect, maybe even rivaling a U.S. president because they've been there for so much longer. Most presidents, 4 to 8 years. They don't have actually that much pull. So if you're one of these globalists and you're attempting to gain more power, you're not going to let anybody know about this. Definitely not the president that was duly elected by the citizens that you're trying to control. That goes completely against what your goal is here. So the idea that there are these black sites that have this technology is not out of the realm of possibilities. And then you can dive into like the little green men and stuff. Now, granted, there's a very good chance if I'm them, I don't want any form of intelligent life flying my craft. I want it all to be drone. Exactly. I want to just be able to sit on my computer and blow up half of Manhattan and scare the shit out of every single banker in the world. You know, attack Singapore, London, and New York, and you're set. You're halfway to having your global tyrancy. And the best possible way to do that and get into and to actually force everyone to move to a cryptocurrency and a one world government might be that fake alien invasion. Likeliness?
I mean, I think it happens in the next 5 to 10 years.
You think 5 to 10 years?
Maybe even longer than that. But at some point, it will happen. And when it does happen, whenever the alien invasion happens, no more than 5 years later, we will be in a global currency.
Unless if people push back.
If people push back, exactly.
And call it for what it is.
And I mean, the way society is looking right now, I mean, a lot of people are speaking up. People have a lot more control.
Yep.
At least the illusion of control.
Right.
Because people are speaking up and there's a lot of things going on. But the actual changes that's fundamentally happening aren't really happening.
But I mean, at first you have to have the people speaking up and...
It's kind of like LGBTQ. LGBTQ started back in the 80s.
Right.
things still aren't fully regulated. You're talking about 30, 40 years later.
Right. Yeah, it takes all movements take time. So this like pro-human movement will take time. But the fact that so many people are talking about it, and it's coming up on the stage, it's good. My only concern is that people are going to see this as a way out. They're going to be like, okay, they have these technologies. I, as a selfish individual, want to be part of this class that's going to give me life extension. That's going to give me whatever shit they throw at me. They say, okay, your children are all going to be freaking geniuses. We're going to let you live for 1,000 years. You can go to Mars for a weekend trip, but you have to join us, and you have to give all your assets to us. Right.
That goes back to that 80%. I mean, if you fall for, I mean, it's almost like getting the vaccine. They're trying to make the vaccine, even though this is the most unresearched, uneducated, untested vaccine in the history of man in the last 200 years. Even you look at chicken pox, you look at anything, is so under researched, so under tested, and they're pushing it, and they're giving companies immunity to the people.
And people are still licking it up because of that peer pressure we talked about earlier, and because the 80% of people do not want to know what is going on. They look at the TV, they listen to their bullshit off that they're spewing on there. They ingest it. They're like, okay, you think for me. There's a great video of H2H. And this guy, he's another podcaster, and he's like, hey, the Fauci, he told me I didn't need to wear the mask, so like I didn't wear the mask, and then he told me to wear the mask, and I wore the mask, and now like he says that I need to wear 2 masks, and now I need 2 masks. It's really not complicated. You don't need to think about it, and that's most people.
Exactly.
It's horrifying. It's like, okay, you have blatant contradicting messages here, and you have no desire to actually investigate what actually might be best for your health here. It's horrifying.
If you look at the emails, he blatantly says is that the masks don't do anything.
Me and Isaiah did another podcast. Hopefully, it's out about Fauci for prison based on those emails.
I mean, and based off those emails, you see everything that he talked about. It went against everything that he said, and so that's why I say everything has a plot. This COVID was a plot. This was man-made. This wasn't something, like, we knew about this. This was man-made. Fauci backed that up in his email.
He literally funded the Wuhan lab, gain of research under Obama. It was moved from North Carolina to there. Now, the question with that is, was it intentionally released?
I don't think it was intentionally
released. That's the question. It's like, was it intentional? Was it not intentional? We're not sure. It doesn't really matter.
That's more of a gray area.
Yeah.
Because nobody knows that.
No.
They're not going to
They probably don't even know that. I mean, that lab had been was cited for many security violations forever. So to say, like, never attribute a maleficence to stupidity, right? So that might be one of those things. But I mean, if we haven't learned as a society to investigate every single thing, like, here's the thing: if 80% of the people on TV have a consensus, and every single idea that goes against that is shuttered and muted, there's something wrong. And if we as a society haven't learned to investigate it on ourselves, we're going to be part of a one world government based on an alien invasion.
It's almost looking at the police. You know, you're talking about defunding, you're talking about all these different things.
Right.
If you really look at it from a global standpoint, or let's not even go global, let's say US, from a US standpoint, as much things as happened, nothing has changed.
No.
They're doing the same things.
No.
We're doing the same
People go out with their signs, they say shit, but at the end of the, like, a lot of those people, it's like, okay, yeah, maybe you had like a good point here, but like, you're literally just virtue signaling. Exactly. It's like, okay, yeah, Black Lives Matter. It's like, great, sounds good, cool. What are you doing about it? Oh, I'm gonna go get my Starbucks coffee after I do this march and throw a bottle at a Louis Vuitton store.
And people know that these things exist, but they're just not doing anything about it.
They just don't care.
People don't want to question it enough. And I think that's the biggest thing that we have in America right now, is that people aren't questioning enough. They're not looking into things enough. Like, they just take in, I guess, what most people call expert advice. But when you research these experts, they aren't really experts. They have their own influences. So if you actually look at the people that we're continuously listening to, the people that we're continuously trusting, then we're finding 10 years down the line, they lied. We're finding out that a lot of things they did were for
Ulterior
alternate motives.
Right.
So it's like, if you really start looking at it, it's like, man, if something happens, I want to see the alternative motive more than I want to see what's actually
Absolutely.
going on.
And that gets back to the point. Well, another thing to kind of keep in mind here is like, great men lead to great times. Great times lead to poor men. Poor men lead to poor times. Poor times lead to great men. And personally, I believe we're in a poor time right now, and this is going to forge the next generation of strong men. And that's the only thing that gives me hope now, is because, like, okay, well, hopefully people see the idiosyncrasies that are going on in media, in politics, in daily life, and
people. I mean, in my personal opinion,
come out on top.
And why the alien invasion would even be possible is because everything, and this is far-fetched, and you can take it as you want, but I feel like that's why a lot of people are being distracted by social media, by music, stuff like that. They want you to focus on those things. They don't want people to actually focus on government, people to actually focus on the real things that's going on in the world. Because if people actually focus on
they would be horrified. They would rise up immediately.
Exactly.
The greatest way to call the masses is to give them a little black mirror.
Give them a black mirror. Put things in front of them that can make them money. Yep. Money, and that's why the dollar is such a big deal, because you see.
Well, that's a two-edged sword. I think a better example is like social media, where it's just like it's just such a time sink. And it's just, there's no value in it. I mean, maybe if you're a creator, then there's value, but for 85% of people, 95% of people, it's just a time sink. So you can numb your head before you go to sleep, so you don't have to worry about the woes of the world, because at the end of the day, you're a selfish cunt and all you care about is yourself. I mean, maybe your family if you're a nice person.
Man, that's why they make it hard for you to be an investor, to be a lot of things that you want to be, because they want you to want to work a 9 to 5. They want you to be comfortable with a 401k. They want you to be comfortable with things that they're okay with you having, but they're not okay. Like, if you go to school, you go to college, I have a master's degree, and I truly think that school is created for you to be part of the machine.
Yep.
They don't want people that want to be the machine. You look at some of the world's richest men, none of them finished school. No. None of them.
Elon Musk dropped out.
I mean, a lot of those people didn't want to do it because they realized that thinking different, thinking outside the box, thinking outside the masses, thinking outside of what the government is trying to sway you to believe, led them to success. Led them to a comfortable life. Led them to not having to work, because it's so. And I mean, especially now on social media, even me, I work a 9 to 5. And I'm trying to figure out, hey, how can I make these things around me make sense so that I can evolve from this? Like, I personally believe nobody in America should be working 9 to 5 past 30 at this point, because there's so many avenues for you.
There's so many opportunities. It's like when people complain and they're 35 and they're like, oh, the system fucked me. It's like, nah, you kind of done fucked yourself.
Exactly.
Like, you got in a stupid amount of debt for a stupid career when you were 18. You didn't know what you want to do, and now you're in said industry that you freaking hate because you had no internal drive to change your actions. And on top of that, you're now in a ton of student debt. And they're just creating
things to make you more comfortable. They want you to, like, you think about even why they sent out, PPP loans to businesses, and they sent out COVID relief stimulus. Like, they want you to be comfortable being at home. They want you to be comfortable. Like, they want you to appreciate a job and go and make.
And ultimately, they really want you to be dependent on the government and to train you to believe that the government can actually solve your problems for you, which is the biggest lie of all time. It's like the scariest words that can ever be said to you is, "Hi, I'm from the government and I'm here to help." Like, oh gosh.
If they telling you they here to help, that means it's a.
They're about to just rail ya.
Exactly, and in the world we live in right now, that's why I truly believe that. They're setting up. COVID was just the beginning.
Absolutely.
COVID was just the beginning. They're setting up other things because they want a global economy.
Yep.
It
Well, a
makes
global
sense.
governance.
They want
We already have a global economy.
global governance.
Yeah.
And I would even say we're even a fully global economy.
Yeah.
Because you're talking about a different drop-offs
Okay,
compared to
yeah.
if you're in Europe
Yeah.
compared to the U.S. and the dollar amount.
Like a fully synchronized economy that they have all their fingers in. They know where everything's going. I mean, you have these what's his name, the guy from the World Economic Forum, trying to get everybody to have implantable chips. That is your medical record, your financial record, your credit, and a way to pay. So all you have to do when you go in the store is it scans you on the way in. It knows you've got what vaccines you've got. It knows where you live, and it knows how much money you got, and boom, you can do it. Now, granted, they're going to have to make it in such a way where it's very convenient to get people to do it, but ultimately, the amount of freedom you're giving up for that is just staggering. Mm-hmm. And the scary part is, I don't think people care that much.
I don't think people care enough because they don't want to fight it. They don't want to fight the social norms because it's kind of like the COVID vaccine. People just want to do it because other people, like, I mean, they had ingrained herd immunity so much to the medical community that they mentally can't get outside of that box and think about the actual effects and think about the longevity and stuff like that. They just think like, yo, if we get this vaccine, it prevents herd immunity. But if you really look at the vaccine is no different than the flu. And imagine how many people still get the flu when they get the flu vaccine.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't matter if it's true or not. It matters if your best friend did it and you want to be part of the club, because at the end of the day, we're just a bunch of tribalist little lemmings running around this earth, and God forbid we get our feelings hurt, or God forbid we don't fit in, or God forbid we don't have the right shoes in class. And I mean, it's just so un-American.
I mean, we live in the land of free, but we're really in prison. We're imprisoned by the lack of imagination, lack of
We've really
research.
drifted away from the foundations of this country, where it's like, hey, you leave me alone, I leave you alone. Go live your best life, and don't mess with me.
I mean,
but if the moment you try to fuck with me, well, then we're gonna have a problem. But now it's just like, oh, well, you can screw with me as much as you want, as long as I get some food in my belly.
Guns, and they've been hard on guns, but if you look at it, they're not doing anything about them.
Right.
Well,
I think that's the final. I think when they go for that, that's the final stopgate to a civil war, because people don't really think about it, but everybody knows it's like, okay, the moment you take away the only defense you have against a tyrannical government, the next thing that comes is, you're going into a concentration camp because you didn't say the right thing in class. Exactly. I think that part gives me hope, because I truly believe that if they actually are dumb enough to go after guns, then there will be a resurgence of patriots that will fight against this tyrannical government. But I don't know if they're going to. We'll see.
I don't think they would do it because they realize the revolt that it would cause.
Yeah, and the amount of bloodshed would be insurmountable.
It's kind of like what we talked about. Like right now, they're trying to get rid of like non-registered guns.
Yeah,
because they want to know where guns are.
Exactly. It all goes back to control and
they'd rather have the control than the deletance of it.
Yep, exactly. Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, thanks for joining us. That's it for This Might Get Us in Trouble. I'm Josh. This is
George.
Like, share, subscribe. Thanks.
Dan, that was a good conversation.
Yeah.